And I was telling Joey that when we selected the 46 Kenyan fellows, and I think when all the embassies, American embassies, picked their fellows in the different countries, we were expecting that this kind of thing would result. You know, if they hadn't gone on the LA Fellowship, as everyone is here, all the fellows, you guys wouldn't be sitting here today. And the fact that you're bringing back some of those lessons and talking about some of the techniques that you learned, and are trying to pass them on to you guys, means that at the grassroots level, where you are, you know, a similar structure to what they learned. Well, we were talking about another, I guess this isn't working, we were talking about another thing that they did, which was make visits to different institutions, let's call them. So I heard that some of the fellows in the cities where they did their university experience visited the mayor's office. They went to corporations. So we said, couldn't they do something similar here? And he said, yes, of course. We could try and go to the, what did you suggest?
The National Assembly and
National Assembly.
the county governments.
Now you have this great challenge here in Kenya. Really, it's fantastic, which is to do something that we've been doing in the United States for 200 years. Share the power that's traditionally in Kenya been at the national level. Share it at the county level. And that implies questions of who gets to decide where my kid can go to school, who gets to decide where there's going to be a new hospital, a new health clinic, right? The budget questions, who gets to decide how much money flows from all the taxes that you pay to the national level, to the ministries, but down to the county level. Who gets to decide where there's going to be a courthouse, right? And how the justice system is going to be administered. So, we haven't worked those things out in the United States yet. There are structures in place, but they're always being challenged. There are cases going on right now in the United States challenging which jurisdiction, which of these levels, the national level, the county level, we have levels even below that, are going to be able to decide certain questions. I'm just trying to think of the one that's being debated right now. Well, yes, so there's been a sea change in America recently in terms of homosexual couples being able to get married, right? And the case has not been completely decided yet by our top court, the Supreme Court. It's gotten to a level right below the Supreme Court. And they said, in the case of a particular state, or it would be a county here in Kenya, yes, homosexual people should be allowed to marry. And the state, the Supreme Court of the state, has refused to go along with that. And so there's a conflict. My point is it's still being worked out in the United States. So it's been 200 years for us. It's only been 3 years. 2 years for you, right? 2010 to 2015, 5 years. But it gives you an opportunity, I guess my point is, as people who care about Kenya, who care about your communities, otherwise you wouldn't be here today because you all have something else to do. Your students, your workers, right? You have a great opportunity to shape Kenya. I'm kind of excited for you. So Andy, are you ready?
Good.
Do I need to stretch? Good. But let me introduce, I think I'm supposed to introduce the team, right? Or have you already been? Everyone. Chris Snipes is our Cultural Affairs Officer. And Liz Reese is the coordinator for YALI. So Liz and Chris are closely involved in choosing the fellows for this year and helping the fellows who are here today organize the conference. And the little guy you met from our
In the back of the room.
handing out your stipends for transportation. I think that's everyone. Should I introduce Andy? Andy Raven. You want me to do it? You go. So Andy joins us from Washington. At the State Department, there's an office that handles this kind of activity for embassies. And Andy works there as a special advisor on youth issues, global youth issues, right? He's a graduate of Harvard University, a great tennis player, as I found out yesterday. And worked, let's see if I can remember your history, where you told me you worked at the State Department, right? Did a graduate degree at the London School of Economics, and then joined the State Department
organizing this. And thank you, firstly, to you all for being here for a full day, for wrestling with these issues. I heard this morning, the tail end of the discussion this morning, and it sounded like some really worthwhile, interesting topics being discussed. I heard you had personal branding this morning, political branding, issues that are incredibly important both in American politics and also in Kenyan politics. My name is Andy Ravens, and I'm the special advisor, as Michael mentioned, for global youth issues at the State Department. And I'm out in Kenya for my first visit to Kenya. I've been in Africa a few times before in the past. And as you guys may have heard, recently, about a week and a half ago, there was a big announcement that President Obama would be coming out to Kenya at the end of July. You guys hear about that? Yeah. A lot of people, I talk to, I say, are you excited about it? And they say, well, he's coming home. He's coming home. So we're really excited. Part of the reason he's going to be here is to be involved in the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, which is a large global event focused on entrepreneurship that President Obama launched in 2009, right after becoming president in Cairo. And then they've had 5 entrepreneurship summits around the world. The first was in Washington, D.C., and the 6th will be this summer in July right here in Kenya. So part of that effort is working with the team here in the embassy to figure out how we can bring more youth and female entrepreneurial voices into the process. So that's part of the reason for the visit here to Kenya. The other reason is to try to really understand the challenges that young Kenyan youth who are moving on all cylinders face, and how they're similar and different from the ones that young people face both in the United States, but also elsewhere around the world. My role is really to help the U.S. government, our government based in Washington, but connected in embassies around the globe, through embassies and consulates, to try to help the U.S. government connect and build relationships with young people around the world. And it's trying to build relationships both to solve some of the current challenges of today, whether that be countering Al-Shabaab in places like Kenya, countering ISIL in parts of the Middle East and elsewhere, dealing with Middle East peace process and negotiations that Joby and others talked about this morning, whether it be climate change, you name it, the current challenges of today. But also, and more importantly, it's really about trying to build that future, build relationships and greater connectivity for the future. And one of the ways that we do that is through regional youth networks, such as YALI, the Young African Leaders Initiative, that a number of the organizers participated in this past year, and through a host of other exchange programs and other opportunities. So this afternoon, what I thought we would do, if it's okay with you all, was that I would give you just a couple minutes of a quick presentation, about no more than 10 minutes, and then we have a larger discussion about some of the challenges that young people, that you all in your respective organizations and personal lives are facing here in Kenya, but also that you see across East Africa, across the region, across Africa as a continent, and across the globe. And then we would jump into an exercise with the YALI fellows, an exercise around trying to identify some of the concrete challenges that you all are dealing with, and then to really try to create an action plan around a couple of those key topics. There's been a lot of attention paid lately to the horrific attacks in Garissa 2 weeks ago. In the United States, it was all over the media. A lot of questions are in the air about how young people can respond positively to those attacks. So I'd love to get your take on that as well during some sort of discussion period too. So does that sound okay? Has anybody here, real quick, just a show of hands, has anyone here been to the States before? Been to the US? Yes? I'll give the yellow out, of course. Anyone else? Anyone know, anyone seen Lupita at the Academy Awards? What's your perceptions? Anybody have strong perceptions of the US? President Obama? Any underlying issues that you associate just off, kind of, they come to your mind? Where does that come to mind when you think of the United States? Yeah, just shout it out.
A very civilized, modern country. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Land of opportunity.
Yeah.
What else?
To develop democracy.
Develop democracy?
Develop democracy. It's a
Pillar of democracy. What do you have?
Hip hop.
Hip hop. Hip hop. Absolutely. Hip hop. What else?
Okay, it's like mention of progressive.
Progressive citizens. Why do you say that?
Okay, given the quality, how they are going to happen.
Please speak up.
Also, the quality of how different issues.
Okay, diversity of opinion or something.
I've been studying several leaders Lincoln,
I've actually been studying the not the biography, but the information there is about the former American leaders, Clinton, Bush, the Harry Truman, and Lincoln, Richard Nixon, and stuff. And it has really given me the perception that these people are progressive in approach to matters. Just in that's all.
Okay, anything else? Yeah, please.
The whole system of government, but like on a larger scale.
Okay, an evolved system of government
But on a larger scale.
on a larger scale. Okay,
In terms of the way the states are divided, and each state like governs its own.
yep, you have the US government, you have 50 states with each with the governor and states' rights. You have the balance of powers between the federal government, the Congress, and the judiciary.
Which
What
is
else?
similar to what was changed in some places.
Similar to constitutional changes here. Yeah. What else? Anything else? Hollywood, thank you. That's only the first thing you hear. Anyone else? And then we'll jump into it. Yeah, please. Power. Oh, power. Superpower. What do you want when you think of the word power? What do you think? Bad word, good word, negative connotations, positive connotations? Huh? Good, bad, what? Good, some people say good, some people say bad. Okay. Depends how. Has anybody seen the show House of Cards? Okay, it's the worst of Washington, but that's a lot of power in it. Yes. Youth empowerment? That there's more in the United States or that there's less? More. Okay. Youth empowerment. Although, do you know that in the United States we still struggle with getting young people to run for office, for politics? I know that Joby was talking about the fact that in Kenya there's also a shared challenge of getting young people to run for political office. Last year, for the first time, the youngest woman in Congress right now is a very dear friend from college, and she's 30 years old. Not that old. It's the youngest of all time in the United States. We also only have 18% of our legislators, our Congress people, and senators are women. So we're getting better, but we still struggle on making sure that women also feel like they can enter into the political process. So we'll jump into a discussion in a few moments. But I just wanted to take a couple minutes here and talk through the moment that we're currently living and the fact that right now, today, because of demographic changes, the fact that 60% of the world is below the age of 30, and technological changes, the fact that we're growing up in a generation where technology is at our fingertips and our ability to connect with one another and with people across the globe creates unprecedented opportunities to create power amongst one another and to create some real meaningful positive change. So I'm going to talk about that in a couple minutes. But first, I just want to give a quick sense of who I am and tell you just a little bit about my story and why I care about these issues. So I grew up, this is a couple pictures of me. You can't see, but I had a bright red pen growing up. I grew up in California, a place called Berkeley, California. And I was the middle of 3 boys growing up. And my parents, my mom is a social worker. My dad is a doctor for kids, a pediatrician. And I had a pretty good childhood. Middle of 3 boys. My parents could afford a middle-class lifestyle. But growing up, I had an incredible thing called a lisp, a speech impediment, where I couldn't say S's, SH's, R's, and the worst combination for me was DR, like the dr sound. I couldn't say R sounds, couldn't say S sounds, and unfortunately my parents, who I love to death, they happened to have named me Andrew with that DR sound right up front. So growing up for years, as you go around the circle, as I'm sure you all did this morning, and you introduce yourself, I could never get my name out. It was always Andu. Eventually, my parents got me to start seeing a speech therapist, someone who can help to work out the kinks in your speech and try to get you talking a little more fluidly. And I spent hours with this speech therapist named Ann Lowe in a dark, pretty grim classroom, trying to get these letters out, these letter combinations out. And she'd have a clicker that you click and try to work on speech. Eventually, in about the 4th grade, I got so sick of not being able to say Andrew, still say Andu, that I changed my name officially to Andy, which I can say no problem. So it's Andy today. So growing up, for me at least, I had a constant challenge of a fear of speaking publicly, a fear of talking in large groups. I don't know, did anybody have a similar thing growing up? Challenges of public speaking or speaking? Finding your own voice? Anyone? Yeah, a little bit. Anybody else? Yeah. So growing up for me, in college and then after college, I've always struggled to try to identify and find my own voice and really unlock my own voice. And once that's been able to be achieved a little bit, realize I had something to say, and even if it took a little longer to say it, and it took a little more work to say it, that I had something I could share and needed to share with others. And that's been a constant source of focus for me, has been trying to work through the US government to help young people unlock their voice and pool their voices together to create power and to create meaningful change. Now, how many of you all, do you guys do public speaking today at all? Anybody afraid to death of public speaking? Anybody scared a little bit of public speaking? Because there are studies. I know some of you are lying, because I'm still a little bit afraid of public speaking. There are studies that are done that say that the number one fear of people across the globe is public speaking. The number 2 fear, death. No joke. Study after study shows that. And there's an American comedian, a guy named Jerry Seinfeld. You all know Jerry Seinfeld's show? And he talks about the idea that if we were, right today, if we were all here at a funeral, it's a little bit dark, but if we were at a funeral, and there was a casket right up here, that most of us in the room would prefer being in the casket than having to be up here with the microphone giving the eulogy of the person in the casket. So one of the challenges I think that we all face, especially as young people, because we're constantly told to wait our turn to speak, not to speak at the dinner table, to let the elders or the folks who allegedly have more information in the room speak first, don't speak until spoken to, of finding our voice, developing our voice, and encouraging others to develop their voice as well. So that's really been a drive for me. Now, right now, at this particular moment in history, it's an amazing time to be a young person, because there's incredible power, I think, at our fingertips, as most of you probably observe day in and day out. And I just want to take a minute to just talk about 5 key ways that young people today are utilizing power because of the demographic and technological changes that are taking place. So one is just numbers. Today, it's unprecedented. There's a youth bulge, a demographic dividend, some people call it. And it's a reality that 60% of the world is below the age of 35. And in Africa, it's about 65% below the age of 30. So an even larger youth bulge right here in Africa and in Kenya. So just from a number standpoint, which can be power if mobilized in the proper fashion, there's an incredible opportunity to mobilize and connect young people in unprecedented ways. Secondly, the idea of the diffusion of power. Power, maybe a generation ago, was in the hands of a few. Whether it was hierarchical institutions like governments, institutions like a particular newspaper or media outlet. Today, because of technology and the ability to mobilize online and offline, power has become diffused through all sorts of tentacles in all sorts of media outlets in newfound ways. Thirdly, This is the media landscape. Years ago, not too long ago, the media outlets in the world were like a box of chocolates. There were only maybe 6 or 9 big media outlets that controlled all of the information space. If you wanted to get your message out, if you wanted to get your profile out, if you wanted to get your entrepreneurial initiative out, if you wanted to get Pali out to a wider demographic, you had to go through one of these outlets that controlled the space and power to be able to get that out to a wider public. Today, arguably there's a grocery store aisle full of media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, online tools, offline tools, new outlets and magazines going up left and right. So all sorts of new opportunities and ways of getting your word, your message out to new audiences. And then fourthly, the leveling power of technology. Someone talked earlier today about challenges of language, challenges of geography. But the reality is that technology today, and real quick, how many people are on Facebook? Everyone? Almost? Some people on Twitter? What's that? So technology today is creating all sorts of opportunities to break down barriers of geography, of language, of connectivity. And with this also comes just the caveat that with the influx of technological tools, it's also being used by groups like ISIL, groups like Al-Shabaab, groups that are trying to utilize and connect to particular marginalized populations within communities to try to sway their minds just because others are trying to do that for a more positive vision of the future. And the one piece that I'll say, which is not here, is the conditions for unrest. The fact that today, in far too many places, that young people's voices aren't heard, their needs aren't met, and their rights aren't upheld. And because of that, I think as a youthful generation, we have a higher propensity, a higher likelihood of challenging the status quo. And because of that, you see a lot of places where instability is created. So the US government, the embassy team here, the US government back in Washington, D.C., what we're trying to do is we're trying to recognize this new world that we're living in, the new demographic changes, the technological changes, and we're trying to build programs and connectivity around this new world that we're living in through a variety of exchange programs. This is actually there's a Yali program for Southeast Asia called YCILI that was created off of Yali because of the success of Yali. There was a brand new one that was created last week around Latin America, trying to build off of the successes of Yali. But in Africa alone, this is the president talking to a group in 2010. It was actually the first President's Forum for Young African Leaders. It sparked the next push into what this Yali program, the Mandela Fellows, and the Yali network that's being created. So the government's really trying to build better bridges with young people to make sure that we're hearing what your challenges are, and as I think was put up here earlier, there's a diagram somewhere in there. What are the interests of Kenyan youth? What are the challenges that you all are dealing with? What are the issues that are keeping you up at night? What actually motivates you? What are you passionate about? What frustrates you about the current situation as it is? And what are the U.S. interests also in a particular place? Many of them will be shared, some of them might not be shared. But the important thing is back to the negotiation from this morning, is finding that area of shared interest, those areas of shared challenges that you can find common cause to work together. And that's what partly what Yali is all about. That's what we're trying to identify, I think, partly today, about what are the challenges that we all share together. And then finding ways to move forward collectively to try to solve some of these issues going forward. And this is just one slide, just to make a quick connection and say that I've been very lucky in this current role that I have back in Washington. I get a chance from time to time to travel and to go visit young people in youth organizations in different parts of the world. And what always strikes me is that whether it's the Starbucks, these are all kind of combinations of the Starbucks logo, which I thought was a little bit interesting. You guys know Caldi's Coffee in Ethiopia? If you believe it out there? There's a chain called Caldi's in Ethiopia. They drop a house, I don't know what the peaks, what are the main places here. But regardless of what coffee place you're going to in the world, the conversations that are taking place at those tables tend to be very similar around trying to create power and then use that power to be able to benefit your community and country in real ways. So I'm going to stop there, and then we'll open things up to a larger discussion, hopefully, about some of the challenges that you all are dealing with in your respective organizations, in your respective communities, and then hopefully we can then move from there with the Yali Fellows, and then to try to tackle these challenges in a little more depth. So I'm going to stop there, and then I guess open things up if there are any immediate questions, or then we can have a discussion about some of the issues that you all are facing currently in your respective communities. So real quick, any questions on any of this, or on the U.S. The United States government role in engaging young people? Yeah. Just be real loud.
A question: how the U.S. government, how you mentor your youth in that, how you ensure that they end up being productive, that they end up in the right careers. So what programs do you guys have there for youth mentorship?
Yes, good question. I'll let Embassy weigh in too. A lot of the, you guys hear me? What? Back there? A lot of the programs that we have a whole menu of exchange programs. Are you talking about U.S. youth or Canadian?
It's the U.S.
U.S. youth. So in the United States, again, we rely a lot on our local governments, local communities to really push people and propel people forwards. We have an extensive education system that we try to encourage people to make sure that they graduate from high school, ideally go to college if that's possible. Try to follow, kind of find what their passion actually is, and then find outlets for their passion, whether that is kind of in the education track, finding a job that meets their particular interest, and then propels them hopefully down a more positive pathway. But we also struggle in the United States with gang violence. In Washington, D.C., where I live, we have a lot of challenges around gang violence and crime. Far too many people don't graduate from high school, don't get an opportunity to go to college, and find themselves with far too few opportunities in their community, and ultimately getting swayed or moving into careers or pathways that are much less productive. So it's a challenge I think that we share in the United States as well. What else? Yeah.
The question is, how do you, maybe in the US, how do you mobilize the youth in participating in entrepreneurship and how do you do that?
Yeah. So some of the great thing I think about entrepreneurship is that you don't necessarily need anybody to teach you how to do it. I think the term that's come up here, and I've been here since Tuesday or Monday night, and the term I've heard about 10 times, which is also a term in the United States, is side hustle. The idea that a lot of people have your kind of your day-to-day routine, but you have something on the side that you're really passionate about. Maybe it's your NGO, maybe it's a business idea that you have that you work on a little bit here and there. And then ultimately, as that grows, with a little help, you turn it into something that's more full-time. That's your full-time job. That's your full-time business. And I think having that support from a network of people who will also share that struggle, I think is a very helpful thing. Plus the idea of having entrepreneurship type trainings and programs, the basics of how to write a business plan, how to get funding for an initiative, that can be helpful too. But if you have ideas for ways that I think that would spark more entrepreneurship within Kenya or within the United States, we would love to hear those thoughts too. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Mercy. I don't want to sound to gender biased, but I want to speak for men. a woman, and I know women face many challenges. Not that men don't face many challenges, because like for now, when you look at this forum, the women are very few. And I wanted to ask, which criteria do you use to make sure that such forums reach to grassroots? Because, for example, many women get married, when, especially the slums, they get married when they are very young. And marriage doesn't make them not to be youths. You find that someone was married when she was 16, because she has responsibilities, like she has kids to take care of, she can't make to come to a forum like this. And when you tell them there's a forum, the first thing they ask, is there reimbursement also? Because she's like,
Is there what?
reimbursement of transport,
Yeah,
is there
yeah,
facilitation in any case, because they are thinking of children they left at home.
Yeah.
So my opinion is this, that many forums be taken to the grassroots. Like if you are targeting Kibera, let it be Kibera. If I think there should be a better structure, that even those who are at the grassroots level should get this civic education as equal as others. Though I still believe in structures as be informed to go inform someone else, but I believe there should be something, a structure tailored to get the grassroots person.
That's a great idea. I think we can be better about that, both as our exchange programs, but I know our team, Chris and Liz and Michael try very hard to make sure that for exchange programs, for people to come from Kenya to the United States on different programs, that they try to find people from diverse backgrounds and diverse constituencies and areas of the country. But we can certainly be better about that. And I think somehow helping the organizers identify who should be at the table is incredibly important. And I think we would welcome any ideas that you have for how we could reach a wider audience and ensure that the people for next sessions come from that wide spectrum of different communities. But thank you for that comment. And it's a challenge again, in the United States too, only 18% of our Congress is women. We struggle with that as well. Hillary Clinton just announced she's running for president again this year. So maybe at some point that glass ceiling will be broken. But to this point, we have never had a U.S. president who's woman. So we struggle. And there was a study that was done actually, a very disconcerting study about young women, middle school age girls in the United States that asked them, there was a study that said, when you grow up, would you rather be president of the United States, a CEO of a business, or the personal assistant for Kim Kardashian? Those are your three choices. And 3-1, the younger women in middle school in 7th and 8th grade all said that they'd rather be the personal assistants to Kim Kardashian than to be a CEO of their own company or president of the United States. So kind of, how do you instill that sense of the possible or possibility for this generation of young people? And see that kind of politics as a route that they can go in. How do you go back and mentor your community to kind of show the rising generation of young women that they can follow your path or somebody else's path, and that these opportunities exist to enter into the political process or the economic space or whatever that might be. So I think that's one thing that hopefully we can address a little more today too. Great comment though. What else? Anything else? Yeah, right back here.
My question is about what you talked about, girls and that will come later in the discussion. But I think it was specified as, is there radicalization in America? Like the way it is here?
Radicalization?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're dealing with that as it's a big issue, it's a global issue. We have a number of, there have been a number of young people in the United States who have gone and joined ISIL, who, in the United States, and I'd love to talk about this in more depth with you guys and get your perspective, but we have a challenge too. The U.S. has I think our diversity is our strength, and we have an incredibly diverse public. By, I think, 2050, the year 2050, we're going to be a majority-minority country. So the majority of our country will all be, no one particular group, whites, Hispanics, you name it, will have a majority of the people in the United States. It's going to be an incredible melting pot of cultures and diversity, which it already is. But unfortunately, with that comes the fact that we still struggle with a lot of challenges around acceptance, around inclusivity, around race relations, as I'm sure you all have followed a little bit around Ferguson and some of the issues that we've had recently in the United States with challenges around race relations, police relations, and you name it. But there's also the underlying issue of radicalization and the fact that there are many people in the United States who unfortunately still feel disenfranchised and excluded from their particular community, and ultimately a few of them are getting picked off online, some offline, but mostly online, by some of these extremist groups who are promising a false hope of a better life somewhere else, or trying to provide a sense of dignity by providing a gun and the opportunity to kill others, or kind of a bankrupt, twisted version of Islam that is based on very little. So it's an issue that I think we deal with in the United States, just as people are dealing with that in Kenya or around the globe. President Obama just held a global summit in Washington at the White House about a month ago on this issue of radicalization, countering violent extremism, and youth was a big piece of that. So I would love to hear if anybody has thoughts, actually even right now, on kind of how you all, given the Garissa attacks from a couple weeks ago, and the fact that it's far too often that people look at young people through a lens of fear and the fact that they might become radicalized, how you all are wrestling with that even in Kenya, if you have ideas for how we can even do that better from a global youth perspective. Yeah.
Okay, my question is, back in the US lectures, how do you engage in policy advocacy to ensure that the youth, there's full representation of the youth in political spheres and also in national institutions?
How is there
Yes, in the States, how do you engage the youth in terms of policy advocacy?
Great question. So there, in the US, there's no quota system for young people entering into politics. There's a challenge of getting young people to feel like they should run for politics. And there are only, I think, a small handful of politicians at the national level who are below the age of 35. I think it's only about 10 to 15 total out of 535 who are below the age of 35. So we struggle in the US as well about trying to get young people to feel like they can represent others, get their voice heard in politics, run for office, and actually try to enter into the political space. We have a vibrant civil society, and there are a lot of organizations that try to get youth voices and then lobby members of Congress or your elected representatives. But we also are trying to find better ways of getting youth voices at the table in politics itself. So why don't we stop there? And I think timing-wise, maybe open things up to, I think just touch on a couple of the points. I'd love to hear your perspectives on a few of the points that were raised. The issue of how do you, as a group and as individuals, how do you mentor and try to create that sense of hope and aspiration for others in your community about getting into politics, about being a CEO, about being the next Kenyatta down the road in Kenyan politics. The question of Garissa, of countering violent extremism, of youth often being seen as potentially much more vulnerable to extremist organizations. And I think also the question of politics. Off of Joby's example, how do we get more young people to try to see that they have a particular, how do we get them more interested in actually running for politics or seeing politics as a space that can really make a difference? So if anyone wants to touch on any of those three questions, great.
Okay, so I'll touch on two. First of all, a reaction maybe on the Garissa attack. I'm also aware in the US there are instances where we find somebody walks into school and kills the kids there, So you end up asking so many questions. How did he end up doing such an act? And it's the same thing here. Like the Garissa attack, one of the perpetrators was a law graduate from a respectable university. So questions are how does such an important youth end up committing such an offense? And one of the ways I can suggest for countering radicalization of youth, first, it's let us include them in policy making, and let us not make the youth feel marginalized, that they are not part of the government in Kenya, or what the decision making in Kenya. So include being all inclusive, then empowering the youth. That is, make them access if it's loans, because as youth, things like capital are a challenge. And we thank the government for funds such as WES, although as of now there's not as effective as we may want it to be. But these groups or ways of which youth can access capital for self like business, they can do business with the capital. Because as youth we suffer from lack of sufficient capital. Yes, maybe I don't know. Thank you.
Security issues in our country is a very sensitive thing, right? Let me just say you're living for nothing, isn't it? Living for nothing applies to most of us, isn't it? Because of the high unemployment rate, very few opportunities for us, corrupted individuals. The negative messages out there are so many. If positive messages were animals, we would call them endangered species. But today, as we sit here, knowing very well positive messages are in danger, we need to form a positive message movement. Me and you understand that there can be no future if we do not take care of the future generation. What will happen if me and you are fighting to our children? So first we need to take care of ourselves. We become the positive message agents. We form a movement to support ourselves, hell or heaven, to give ourselves the positive message and to connect and pass the positive information that we have. That's why when Joby and the rest of us say this is what we are going to do, and it has happened when I had a youth meeting in Kakamega, I called leaders. That was not enough. Joby and Anna on this. And leaders came all the way from Taita. He traveled to Kakamega. We had a meeting, and I want to now call upon each and every one of you to go out there and be the positive agent. That is the way to go. We call our development partners to help us spear the positive message, clear networking, and create opportunities for the youth so that we can live for today and not be hopeful to gain 72 margins in the next world.
Wow. I think we should spend a little time today maybe exploring that in a little more depth.
Good evening, or good afternoon. First and foremost, I would like to talk about the financial bit of it.
Sorry, will you guys just introduce your name and where you're coming from, just because I didn't get the intros earlier today.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
My name is Jeremy Lekki. I come from Lekki Ventures. Lekki Venture is a marketing, PR, communication company, and majorly dwells in nurturing talent in the lines of modeling.
Great.
Okay, on to my point. That is finance. I majorly believe, and in terms of what we're talking about, stories like what happened in Garissa, I tend to believe it all has something to do with, first and foremost, our education system. Most of us, the majority, tend to believe after school, that is high school, then you go to the college, you go to the university, they tend to believe that the white collar system, whereby you, after college, you get a white collar job, you're there, the finances start running, streaming in. That attitude has made most youth not to dare risk in terms of being the employers themselves. I've happened to be in a scenario whereby in my office got over 1,000 requests, people asking me for job opportunity. And probably at that particular time, your mainstream client only gives you probably 100 positions, and there you have now 1,000 requests. How do you go about it? Looking at it critically, I tend to believe, because when you discuss with someone tells you, I can start my own business, I can't brand myself, or I can't brand myself in terms of the ones, the talents or the models, they want to venture into advertisements so that they get paid for doing a billboard or doing a TV commercial. But they're telling me I can't brand myself, I don't have finances to brand myself. Then you look at them and you ask them, then who are the networks, who are the people around you? So all these looking at them, I zero it down into the attitude and the culture we developed while we were in our school system, like the high school system, whereby we were kind of being spoon-fed on everything. Then again, I believe as a child grows up, the parents are supposed to dwell on two things, and role play. Probably the father takes on to the role of looking at this child growing up, checking on the talent side, and the mother probably checking on the education side. If the child is a genius and can study and get a degree in medicine and get a PhD and all those things, well, I could support. But here is a parent pushing a child to study medicine, and the child not even slight understanding of that particular career being pushed on them. They have an understanding of that career being pushed on them. So I think it's all about our attitude and the systems created for us as the youth, probably being vulnerable for that radicalization kind of a system. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, maybe also have some comments, and we're going to split up into smaller groups, I think, with
do you want us to break into small groups and then we can
I think
share
that's
that?
why don't,
Right.
if you guys are okay with that, I think we're going to split, we're going to have some of the young fellows lead a few of the small groups. And we're going to, I think, if you're okay with, I guess, issue areas that were discussed, if one group is willing to touch on the issue of Larissa, okay, kind of what people have been talking about, maybe something around the positive message movement, I think is very powerful. I think the Larissa opportunity on one hand, the attraction on one hand, is every action has a reaction. And I think there's a reaction that you just heard that could be something that's a lot more positive in terms of using the tragedy in Larissa to really create some sort of movement and pushing back against this kind of extremist elements. If one group maybe wants to touch on the issue of, would you want to kind of lead that group on how do you create pathways for young people to follow into politics, into kind of business, whatever that might look like for, how do you get people more excited about politics, entrepreneurship, how do you provide that inspiration for young people in your communities and countries? And your topics that people want to kind of tackle, I think we probably have 4 groups. Larissa being one, kind of extremism, positive messaging being one group. 2 is kind of pathways to politics for young people, pathways to become entrepreneurs. What else are the big challenges that you all are facing? We need 2 more.
We already have 3. One positive message, one pathways, and the other one radicalization. So maybe one more.
One more. Yeah.
Business growth.
Business growth? How many people